tournaments, and if they're really good, they'll play in national tournaments as well.
Yeah.
But they only play for the school. They don't play for like a club or anything like that. But then once they get to 15, if they show talent, there are specific high schools that are like sort of sports academies, if you like.
Yeah.
So like all the good baseball players go to this same high school. All the good football players go to this same high school. So the sports equivalent of a polytechnic, right?
Yeah.
And basically, the kids will go there for 3 years, and then once they graduate, if they're good enough, they get snapped up by J League teams. Because by the time they leave school, they're 18, and you know yourself, an 18-year-old, if he's good enough, could get into the first team of a football team these days. So, the J League does have like a youth league, which most of these players go into, but it's most of these players at the high school level, if they're good enough, they go straight into the first team.
See, straight away, there's a bit of an infrastructure there, a system there, and it's obviously been in place for a while. Campbell Ogilvie, you big hun, you're obviously bound to be listening to this podcast. Take note of what happens in Japan.
But you see, there's one reason why it wouldn't work in Scotland, and I hate to be cynical, I hate to be the depressed one, but do you really think Scottish Wains are going to be happy to spend 4 hours a day after school playing sports?
Potentially not.
Japanese kids have got this work ethic, and it's almost from birth. It's instilled in them, and if they choose to do something, they don't just want to be good at it; they want to be the best at it.
But see if that's part of the culture and that's part of the norm anyway, then it's easy to fall into. It would take a huge change in mentality in Scotland for that to happen right now.
Again, it's the culture. It goes back to that again about what you're used to doing. So if you do what you always do, you'll get what you always got. I remember being a boy, like leaving school and playing football in the street for 4 years. So if it's something that's structured and it doesn't cost any money, we're investing in young people's futures. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work. You could do soccer, football, golf, basketball, anything apart from flutes.
I mean, there was the interview a few years ago with Shunsuke Nakamura, and somebody actually asked him, like, why did you become a professional footballer? And he actually said, because I wasn't good enough for the baseball team.
Yeah.
He actually wanted to play baseball when he was in junior high, but his teacher told him, look, you're better at football, go and play football. And just lucky the teacher had a word with him,
Absolutely.
Kevin.
There's
a wee echo coming at you.
There is, mate. I don't know what's up. Maybe Pat can tell us or shed some light as to what's happening there.
There's a wee echo at your side, Kev, yep.
I don't know. Is it my side?
I've cleared that up, so, yep. It's only you.
You've sorted it?
No, I said you're the only one that's got it, so we're alright.
Alright, okay.
Nothing I can do to fix it, anyway.
Seems to be okay now, guys.
Now listen, Pat, you've had so much time to think about this now, but I'm going to put the pressure on you, talking about the whole youth system with football in general. Now, in Australia, I've only been in the country for a fraction of the time you've been, mate, but my eyes have been open to the way things are done and should be done, potentially, from the whole, and I'm not just talking about football, I'm just talking about sport in general, the whole kind of attitude towards sport in Australia. They encourage it, they facilitate it, they invest in it financially, and they get the fruits of it later on. But I mean, you're going through. You've got young kids right now, Pat, and you're in Melbourne and Victoria. You've got them into the Aussie rules and things like that just now. But in terms of what's available for youth development and sport in Australia, give us a little bit of an insight to our friends back home.
Well, I'd say, and I've said this to a few people back home in Scotland, because you do get the odd relative saying, I should do what you've done, and I should come out there and live in Australia and stuff. And I can't think of any sort of better place in the world to raise kids. I know we have people up north of the country have a bit of a dig at us for the weather and stuff like that. Melbourne has you got your 4 distinct seasons. You got spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and
all in one day.
Sometimes all in one day, especially in winter time. Today was 30 degrees and nice beautiful sunny day. It was 31 the other day. Tomorrow's going to be 23, 24 degrees. So you have the climate for it to pretty much to do whatever you want. Now you think of back in Scotland where for several months a year it's cold, damp, pissing down, freezing, and that doesn't.
Bastards.
And it doesn't really.
Red Tories, that is.
It doesn't really give people the incentive to go and do sports. So I reckon that's part of the reason is for kids just not being interested. I can remember when I grew up, and you would know down Sykeside Parks, playing for All Saints, and we couldn't see the goals for the snow that was falling. So we took centre and you couldn't actually see the goal. Actually, I remember hitting a shot from halfway line. Now, I don't even think kids would be allowed to play in weather like that these days. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that they would just call the game off. But over here, because the climate is one massive thing. So in Melbourne, you have in southern states, you have winter time, and that's like an Aussie Rules kind of time of the year. Now that's finished, and it's the soccer. It's the soccer kind of season. Cricket's just about to start. My kids play basketball, or my older son plays basketball. There's a baseball sort of centre about a 10-minute bike ride away from where I am. There's AstroTurf football parks. Like as in soccer football parks. There's just all this stuff around, and that's just in the area that I live. So I don't know what it's like back home these days. I've been away for a long time, but I can't imagine the facilities would be anything even close to that here. I mean, here, a lot of it here is also kind of community based. So clubs actually, I played football for a team called Croydon City Arrows many years ago. Only played a few games, but the reason I didn't want to play with them is the players get paid. So the senior team get paid, and it's a decent wage at that as well. They get paid for the games that they play. They get all their football boots not bought for. There's none of this stuff about everyone's got to pay £2 for the referee. All that stuff's all covered. They've got sort of I guess like social clubs and stuff like that attached to the club, which is where they raise a lot of the money. There's just all this stuff goes on, and that's just one example. And it's just you think of the difference between that and back home. Now I don't know what it's like for people back home, but for me, if I had sort of my sons back in Scotland and it is pouring down rain, would you want to be taking them out to a football park to stand there and get in a howling wind, freezing cold, and the wind's just complaining?
To get shouted at by some mad dad from the other team.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the climate is a massive thing, but here it's in terms. I can't really speak. I don't follow any A-League stuff, so I can't tell you what their facilities like. I can tell you what the Aussie Rules stuff's like in terms of what my club do, and they've got their own sort of training facilities. They've got their own sort of psychologists. They've got their own. This whole thing about Ronnie Dyler bringing in the players sit together and they eat together. That's been in Aussie Rules for 20 years.
Yeah.
That they do their training in the morning, then they do, they'll end up sort of having a lunch and stuff like that. They'll go into the whole weights. They've got big sort of gyms and stuff like that at the clubs, and they'll do their weight training and stuff like that. But these guys are serious, genuine athletes. If anyone's ever had the privilege of seeing the size of an oval and seeing how much effort these guys put in, it is astounding. It's astounding. These guys are genuine athletes. They'd be 6 foot, 6'1", 6'3". There's one guy. What's Aaron Sandilands plays for Frio? How big would he be?
6'7".
6'7". These guys are athletes. Now, and Liam's saying that kids at school and stuff like that, it's kind of instilled into them. I think that's where the Aussies kind of, for me, fall down a little bit. That they don't kind of have that mentality, if you know what I mean. They love their sport, and Melbourne's the so-called sports capital of Australia, and they genuinely do love a sport in the city. But you don't see kids out in the street playing football all the time, and you don't see the parks full. I mean, you get the odd kid that just does it, and it's their thing. The schools don't really, especially the primary schools, don't really push it. When you get to high school, then that's they start driving into you've got to do a sport and that sort of thing. But if they had that sort of similar mentality that the Japanese have at a young age, they'd take over the world because they're sports mad. They love everything. I mean, Liverpool came out here in,
Yeah.
what would it be, 18 months ago, like 2 years ago, I can't remember.
A year and a half ago, aye.
So, and they sold the MCG, but you're talking 100, just over 100,000 people sold out just to watch a Liverpool friendly. They're absolutely football mad, like sport mad.
Well, I will go on record right now and say that I read a report about 4 or 5 months ago that soccer in Australia is the most played sport.
Yeah, that'll be right.
It always has been.
We have the A-League, we have the equivalent of like state championships, which is kind of like junior. And like I've been here in Mandurah for 3.5 months now. In Geraldton, Geraldton's a very like population 36,000, 35,000.
Yeah.
And there's like 5-6 teams there, soccer teams, and they play state championships as well. So there's a lot of movement in terms of that. I know in particular in WA, there's a lot of like private and government funded businesses or organisations that do soccer coaching from early ages right through, from primary through to secondary, the equivalent back home. But I think even back home as well, there's a big programme in the UK, Street League. They do a lot of like football things with homeless guys and all that, guys who are unemployed. But I think the difference between here and back home is the weather. But being an ex-manager, a youth project back in Glasgow, when we offered sport activities that were subsidised, young people took them up like that. But it's the cost back home that's, if you go and do 5-a-side football indoors, it costs a fortune. That's the main difference. Whereas out here, it still costs a fortune, but you can do it outside.
Well, see, that's, to be honest with you, the reason that my sons play Aussie Rules and not soccer football is the cost. Soccer in Melbourne is incredibly expensive for your kids to do, incredibly. Yeah. But the reason for that is that they actually have like fully paid up certified coaches. Yeah. Whereas the Aussie Rules side of it, like we pay, I don't quote me in the exact figure, but it's around $60, and that's that goes for like 3-4 months. Maybe 3 months or so of the football. Actually, probably from April, maybe 3-4 months. Yeah. And that's so every Saturday morning you would have the one I go to is I take my kids to. There would be 250 kids out in 2 big ovals, all doing Aussie Rolls. Now each one of them pays, I said $50-60 bucks, right? But for that you get your Auskick bag, you get your cap, you get your football, you get all these stickers, and you get all that sort of stuff. The day you walk up, like an Auskick bottle, like a plastic bottle, they're just they're mad for it. They're absolutely mad for it. But the kids, it's just such a good sport. And the AFL, although it's kind of, it's basically just blinding them into thinking there is only one sport.
That's it.
But they do a great job. They do a great job at it.
But it's the exact same here. Like when I was in Geraldton all the years as well, the soccer teams, they had to fight tooth and nail to raise money, and they charge you money to come and play because the coaches they need to pay them. Whereas the AFL, it's like back in Scotland, football is the main sport. People volunteer and coach teams and all that. And it's the same here. The fundraising for AFL and WA is all done by volunteers. The coachings are done by volunteers. So that's why it costs less to do it. When I was in Scotland 6-7 years ago, we created this golf programme. You'd think in Scotland golf is the main sport, which it probably is at some point, but young people can't afford to play it. And you don't get volunteers teaching that, but you get volunteers teaching football. And it's the exact same here. AFL, you get tons of people going there and volunteering their time, and that's why it costs less to do the AFL.
Yeah. Well, I went and did training to be an AFL youth coach. So I'm like a level 1 AFL Auskick coach. And it's just because I love the sport, I think it's good, and it's good for kids, but it's as much a community thing as it is the whole sport thing. Because, I mean, you got and watch your small little local club, and there'd be 200-300 people watching. So the guys would be...
The 2 jobs, Pat, and Kevin's not getting any.
Yeah.
Guys, see that... Can I make the comparison here?
Go for it, Jeff.
I mean, the facilities still aren't great. They are improving, right? One of the reasons why I did want a yes vote is, for me, if you're spending money on nuclear weapons and tried and you're not chasing up tax from the wealthy, then that
or
that's